George the Animal Steele had a green tongue, a hairy chest, and the mental gimmick of a furniture-chucking toddler. But behind all that soft-focus goofiness was a real-life shooter who could go from chewing turnbuckles to chewing out coworkers with that same unblinking fury. This video isn't about the lovable goon who chased Miss Elizabeth like a Disney bear in heat. It's about the real George Steele, a man who held grudges, bit through bad politics, and called out bull when it got in his way. And when that switch flipped, he didn't just act like a savage, he became one. We're not talking about worked feuds or staged tantrums. This is shoot heat only. 3 real men George had actual problems with, from violent standoffs to deep professional bitterness that made him break kayfabe decades before the rest of the locker room even knew how. This is not a tribute video. This is a funeral march for fake friendships. So spit out the foam, lace up the boots, and say a prayer for whoever crossed the animal. Because once he locked in, he never let go. Coming up, the first man who got bit, and not just in the ring. By the time Steele got paired with Randy Savage in 1986, most fans saw it as a classic Beauty and the Beast angle. What they didn't see, what no one saw, was that backstage, this was less of a fairy tale and more of a prison yard beef. Savage was paranoid, territorial, and about as emotionally stable as a possum on a Red Bull bender. And Steele? He played dumb on screen, but off screen he wasn't taking orders from a guy in rhinestones. The heat started with Miss Elizabeth. Steele didn't just act smitten for the camera, he treated her with real kindness backstage. According to multiple sources, that set Savage off. Steele would later say, "He was the most jealous man I ever met in the business. Liz couldn't sneeze without Randy counting the tissue squares." But it hit full shoot mode one night in the locker room showers. Steele walked in after a match, soaked in sweat, minding his business. Savage was already in there, standing like he was guarding the Roman Empire with a bar of Irish Spring. Words flew, real ones. Steele recalled that Savage accused him of looking at Liz too long during a promo taping, and things went from soap to slugfest. While it never became a full-blown brawl, Savage lunged, and Steele, ever the pro, didn't back down. He admitted years later that if they hadn't been separated, he might have tried to break a bottle over my head, but I was going to rip off his leg and feed it to him. Liz, for her part, kept quiet, but others backstage noticed she'd walk around Steele like he was radioactive after that. Not because she feared him, but because she knew Savage was watching. Always. It poisoned their entire working relationship. Savage refused to call spots with Steele directly after that. Everything had to go through agents. Steele played along in the ring, but behind the scenes, he thought Savage was a control freak wrapped in sequins, and he wasn't wrong. Funny how Savage called himself the Madness. Steele just thought of him as that guy who never learned how to share. Steele wasn't just a wild beast in the ring, he was a man who fiercely guarded his identity. When Hulk Hogan came in, riding the tidal wave of Hulkamania, the locker room atmosphere shifted. Hogan's empire wasn't just about muscle and charisma, it was about control, and the animal wasn't about to become a tamed pet. Steele had built his whole career on this primal persona, the wild man who scared crowds with those googly eyes and unpredictable antics, but backstage, he felt that Hogan and the creative team were turning him into a watered-down mascot. Steele said flat out, "They wanted me to be a friendly puppy when I was bred to be a grizzly." That creative tension turned to real backstage friction. Steele openly griped about losing spotlight moments, about having to chew foam instead of faces. The phrase, "Hogan's pet project," wasn't just a joke. It stung him like a slap in the chops. During shoot interviews, Steele recalled one locker room moment where he told Hogan straight, "I'm the animal, not your sidekick. If you want tame, get a poodle." Hogan, known for his big man diplomacy, apparently didn't appreciate the defiance. Sources say their conversations had an edge that rarely softened, with Steele refusing to bend to the Hulkster's demands. That led to tension that lingered like a bad smell, with Steele sticking to his guns and his gums. The irony? Hogan's crew pushed the animal gimmick because it sold tickets, but then tried to rein it in because it made Hogan look less shiny. Steele wasn't having it. He bit back, figuratively and sometimes literally. Hogan said, "I want you bigger than me." Steele said, "Cool, just don't drool in my mouth." Bottom line, Steele was never going to be Hogan's puppy. He was the dog that bit the hand that tried to feed him, and the locker room wasn't ready for that level of savage. By the time Bret Hart hit his stride in the early 90s, the new generation was rolling in. Athleticism, long matches, technical precision. But George Steele, old school through and through, didn't care how smooth your arm drags were. If you weren't humble, you were a problem. And Bret? Steele thought he acted like the company owed him dinner and a back rub. Their shoot heat started backstage in 1992, when Steele was working as a road agent, a role with power but zero tolerance for egos. Bret was late to a show, not 20 minutes, just 2. Steele fined him $500 on the spot, without a warning or a wink. That wasn't policy, that was a message. Bret later wrote about it in his book with that quiet rage only he can muster, clearly feeling like Steele was trying to put him in his place. And let's be real, he was. The animal never respected the hitman's backstage swagger. To Steele, Bret walked around like a locker room messiah who handed out stars instead of handshakes. Then came the Montreal Screwjob, and Steele, decades removed from the ring, ripped Bret publicly, calling the whole saga one of the biggest jokes in wrestling history. And that was the heart of the issue. Steele came from a generation of wrestlers who bit through frustration. Bret came from one who filed grievances, oil and water, canvas and chalkboard. They never fought, they didn't need to. Their shoot heat lived in silence, sarcasm, and bitterness. One fined the other erased him from history. Welcome to the Cold War nobody noticed, but both men never forgot. He didn't throw punches in catering. He didn't flip tables or call press conferences. He just remembered, quietly, for years. The act was wild, sure. Green tongue, crazy eyes, chewing the scenery like a raccoon in a fireworks factory. But behind the howling and foam was a man who carried grudges with surgical precision. The kind that didn't fade, didn't soften, didn't leave room for apology. If you crossed him, he didn't bark. He locked eyes. He stared through you. And if you weren't careful, you got bit. Just not always in front of the fans. He never respected false power. He hated being told how to behave by people who never survived what he did. The worst kind of heat, in his eyes, came from arrogance disguised as authority. He knew when someone was coasting. He knew when someone was politicking. And he made it clear. You couldn't outwork him. You definitely couldn't out-crazy him. Most of the new generation didn't even know they were on his list until it was too late. 1 minute you're showing up late to a building, the next you're $500 lighter, and wondering why the old guy in the polo shirt just wrote your name down like it was a restaurant waitlist. That wasn't ego, that was discipline. He believed the business needed guard dogs. He volunteered to bite. And when it came time to talk, decades later, he didn't rewrite the past. He didn't soften the edges. He told it how he remembered it. Sharp, bitter, real. That's what made him terrifying. Not the character, the memory. You didn't know when the grudge started, and you never, ever knew if it was over. If you're into videos that bury the myth and drag the receipts, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life heat. No gimmicks, no kayfabe, just pure behind-the-curtain drama, the way the old heads actually lived it. Thanks for watching.